Hi, everyone. If you could please grab your seat, we're going to get started. No need to run. Thank you so much. Good evening. Is it evening? I guess it is 5:30. My name is Katie Bailey, and I am the Senior Director at HearstLab, based here at Hearst HQ. Woo. I could not be more excited about the content and conversation we have in store for you all around a topic that we can all get behind: food. First, a little context on us. Hearst is one of the largest diversified information services and media companies in the world. Many of you likely know Hearst for its magazine brands, Elle, Cosmo, Good Housekeeping, Delish, or its TV networks such as A&E, History, and ESPN. But what most people don't know is that Hearst also includes a range of B2B data and software solutions in the healthcare tech, transportation, logistics industries, as well as global financial services leader, Fitch Ratings. And that's not all. Hearst also has a major footprint in philanthropy through Hearst Foundations and venture investing. Speaking of, did you know only 2% of venture capital goes to women-led companies? That's where you go, boo. HearstLab was founded nearly 10 years ago, specifically to close this gap. We've invested nearly $100 million exclusively in early stage women-led tech startups worldwide, including 3 of the speakers that you're going to hear from today. Another eye-opening statistic: did you know that women influence 93% of food purchases? For this year's New York Tech Week, it felt like the perfect opportunity to bring together some of the amazing teams building the next generation of food and beverage empires and the tech fueling their growth. In this room, we've got an impressive mix of founders, operators, investors, and brand leaders. So please don't be shy in introducing yourselves to us and each other. We hope this is the first of many conversations together. Before we kick off our first session, a few more quick thank yous and housekeeping notes. Thank you to HearstLab's chairwoman, Eve, in our first row, and Hearst executives team for their unwavering support of the HearstLab community and programming like this. Thank you also to our partners at the Female Founder Collective and Delish for pulling together this amazing programming. Thank you to Nancy and Rule Breaker Snacks for supplying some delicious bites for our networking. And last but not least, please refer to our digital program. You'll see the QR code around a few times to learn more about each speaker, their respective organization, and the best way to get in touch to follow up. With that, Allie, over to you.
Thank you, Katie. Hi, everyone. I'm Allie Wyatt. I am the co-founder and CEO of Female Founder Collective. We have a platform and community called the 10th House, and the 10th House is a place where you can go and ask everyday questions around the things that come up, whether it be the best CRM, the perfect job spec for that COO you want to hire, or if you're trying to figure out if you should hire an outsourced accounting firm. This is where we go and we share all this information. We do programming like this. We're so excited to be working with Hearst, and actually we have a tech cohort coming up. You heard it first here. It's actually being announced tomorrow. And right now we are really thrilled that we are actually doing a food and beverage accelerator called Seed Her. And that is a 12-week curriculum to get founders who have already gotten to product market fit. So they're at about 500K plus in revenue. And the goal is for them to get wider distribution and to scale up and eventually to exit so they can put all of their money that they make back into the system. But without further ado, I'm super excited to be here with some amazing founders to be talking about the future of food. And that's really how technology and community are shaping product development and purchase decisions. I wanted to give a little context on each of our founders here in terms of the businesses that they have and what they do as I jump into questions. First, we have Viveka Holyalkar, who's the co-founder and CEO of Beam Impact, which is a platform that turns retail purchases into opportunity for social good. We'll get more into what that means in just a bit. We have Callista Corley, who is the Chief Revenue Officer of Highlight, which is an in-home product testing platform. And we have Kristen Wiley, who is the founder and CEO at Statosphere, which is a micro-influencer marketing platform. So I'm going to dive right in. And my first question is actually for you, Kristen. And that is that you've helped countless brands get their products into the hands of the right consumers. And what do successful brands get right about community and influence that others miss, and what you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess a little more background on our platform too. So we're the only platform that can get over 1,000 people posting with less than an hour of work. So we're really for like scale and working with these micro nano. And I wanted to give that context in the context of community, because community isn't just these big macro influencers. It's really the boots on the ground that, you know, have only a few hundred followers. It's actually all the people in this room that are telling their friends about the amazing products that they've heard about. And it's brands that are leaning into these communities that are seeing amazing results. There's one brand that actually comes to mind that is female founded, Belgian Boys. I don't know if anyone follows
Love Belgian
her.
Boys.
I think they've done an incredible job over there at leaning into their community. They actually, one of their products was specifically created when they saw a trend on TikTok happening around these like waffles with syrup in them or pancakes. And she actually created a product after listening to her community. Like, how cool is that? Like, it's not just giving your community and hoping they promote, it's actually listening to them and building your products around them as well.
And what did they do with the syrup? I'm so curious.
They like created these like little bites that had the syrup inside of them or something. I don't know. They're delicious. I've had them. They're highly recommend. But
I think we're all gonna go purchase those afterwards.
Yeah, but great brand. And I think that's a really good example of the brands that are doing it well are actually not just viewing them as, you know, oh, just people who can tell people about my product. It's also listening and having a two-way conversation with them. And then actually taking it and even using it in part of your decisions of what products you're going to create and change.
So smart and so needed. We were talking about that beforehand. What a monster of a process it is to try to manage your influencers as well as any sort of community activation. So love that you're doing that. Callista, I'm going to go to you because we were talking about customer centricity, which was actually a new term for me, embarrassingly enough, beforehand. But I wanted to talk about what that really looks like. And when you're developing snack, drink, or wellness products, what specifically do you see as customer centricity?
Yeah, you're not the only one who has not heard of that. So you may have heard of it, but to take a step back, what I get to do on a daily basis at Highlight is we are working with brands. They're leveraging our product intelligence platform. And what we're doing is we're actually bringing customer centricity to life. And what that means is we are infusing and empowering consumers at every decision that a brand might make. So whether that's at ideation stage, really the front end where they're trying to figure out, is there a fit for this product? What is the niche? Where am I going and why? And who's my consumer? To now I have some concepts. Let me figure out which concept might fly in this market. All the way to I now have prototypes and it's time to actually get consumer voice on sensory elements, if it's a snack, for example. So customer centricity is committing, I think, really to yourself and to your company that customer voice is critically important, and it is going to enable and should drive decisions that you make not just once, but all the time. So along that product life cycle, and if it's a snack, that would be again from ideation, hear the voice of your consumers all the way through concept to actually the physical product is there. Do they like it? Is that the right consumer for this product? And consistently bring that voice to life all the time. By the way, that includes renovation. So a lot of hero products need consumer voice because things change in our perceptions and things we need change along that.
Love that. And can you give one example maybe of like customer centricity for a brand that you've seen do really well in one channel? I know it's a very long life cycle.
Yeah, I would say we work with brands that are emerging and really coming in to disrupt all the way to the largest brands like a Nestle. I would say if I'm focused on a bigger brand, I would say Nestle Accelerator is a great example of a company that's really dedicated to the consumer voice. So their Accelerator team is doing research every single day to bring that voice to life. And so it's from the very beginning all the way throughout, and then they're bringing that data to their stakeholders, and they are not just saying it and showing the charts, they're actually showing their faces. And that can make a huge difference, which, not to nerd out here, but in research, that's what we call quant and qual. So bringing that consumer voice is not only just showcasing the data, which Nestle does in their accelerator program, whether it's PMS chocolates, by the way, ladies, but also bringing that voice through video, through actual hearing from them, whether it's an IDI. So they're an
And
example.
that's internally that they're sharing that.
That's
information
internally,
with the
yeah. And
stakeholder.
actually, great point. A lot of brands are now thinking about their customers that are giving their opinions. They have the right to hear back the aggregate, so the data across the board. What do other consumers like me actually think about this product? So it's called share back programs. And a lot of brands are finding it really helpful to drive consumer loyalty, to not just use consumer centricity and that data for their own product decisions, but actually to share that back with their consumers and give them an idea of what really community they're a part of with that brand.
Very interesting. And Vivica, you've worked with a lot of big brands as well, like Olipop and Unilever. What are the most forward-thinking CPG brands? What do they have in common when it comes to building consideration and loyalty?
Definitely. First of all, so excited to be here. I always love when I get to be in rooms like this, so many incredible women in this space. And that's such a great question. I think it echoes a lot of what Kristen and Kalista just touched on as well, with brands that get it right well are really good at being true to who they are, but also true to who their customer is. So to be in the realm of consideration at all, of course, you've got to get quality right and price right first. But then from there, brands are up against more now than ever because it's so expensive to acquire a customer. Consumers are more stretched than ever in terms of their spending. So in order to cut through the noise and actually win the consideration battle and get people to come back and buy from you again and again, it is really important to establish an emotional connection. And to do that in a way that feels real, especially for today's consumers who are really savvy, really skeptical, canceling brands left and right when they get it wrong. It has to be true to who that brand is. So what we do is we help brands bring their values to life across the consumer journey in a way that's hyper transparent and gamified. So when you're buying from a brand like Olipop online, you can choose where 1% of your purchase is donated. They donate, not you. And then we give you transparency in towards how your goals are funding 1,000 pounds of free produce, for instance, for families in food deserts in your area. And it feels so personalized to you based on your location. But it also has to be, if a brand's using a ton of plastic packaging, they can't be donating to remove plastic from the ocean. Customers are going to sniff that a mile away. So that's part of being true to who the brand is. On the other side of the equation, in terms of listening to the consumer and being consumer centric, we work with an ice cream brand who had never had any type of impact before, wanted to figure out how to enter the conversation. And we helped them start supporting mental health and self-care initiatives, because buying their product is something that people love. It's a dopamine rush after a hard day. And that's a part of the conversation that they can speak to authentically.
And in terms of the 1% that they might allocate, or whatever percentage it is that something that you go to them and suggest, or is that something that they've already allocated as part of their overall marketing budget?
It's such a great question. So it can fall either way. And very quick backstory, my first experience with this space was when I was 15, and I started an environmental nonprofit and called a number I found online, and the NBA ended up sponsoring us, and we ended up installing $1 million of solar panels in local schools within a year. And I never thought that was going to happen. And what I realized is, getting to your question, so many brands out there are donating tons of money behind the scenes, and consumers who are really anxious to make a bigger impact in their lives have zero idea. And the reason is, it's not because brands aren't talking about it, but every brand is talking about it so much that there's a huge saturation of greenwashing claims. 88% of people out there say they don't trust any of the claims for the brands that they buy from. But meanwhile, also, I've later worked at McKinsey as a retail consultant. We're working with tons of brands who are trying to find more profitable ways to acquire and retain customers than just discounts, which were just killing their margins as CACs are higher than ever. So that is how we're growing the pie of which brands are making an impact, by showing people who've never donated before, hey, you need a more profitable way to start driving conversion, to enter the conversation with customers than just discounts, which are buying revenue and are short term anyway. So we've now been able to prove that every $1 we make is about 4 to nonprofits and 60 in incremental revenue for our partners,
Wow.
which gets a lot more people to donate along the way.
Absolutely. And do the consumers, they actually pick which nonprofits they want to?
Yeah,
donate to?
exactly. So you as a consumer, if you're buying from brands like Stumptown Coffee or Olipop or Nestle Health Sciences, we work with some of their brands. When you're buying something, you can choose a nonprofit where part of your purchase is donated, and the nonprofits you see are vetted. They're curated to reflect who that brand is, and they can be tailored to you where you are. So you might see a different set than I would based on our locations, can
Yeah.
be hyper relevant to you and your spending behavior across the internet.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Callista, I want to go to you because I want to talk about how technology can drive smarter product market fit, which we're all going to see the impact of that across AI as well. But with your business specifically in Highlight, can you share an example of a surprising insight from product testing that you have found in the past that meaningfully changed a go-to-market plan?
Yeah, so many. It's hard to choose. I will say, as a Highlight employee working with brands, when the data comes back and it doesn't back up their hypothesis or what they think, your initial reaction is, oh shit, it's painful. But I will say that is where the beauty happens, because they're able to pivot very quickly. And a lot of times that is a whole go-to-market strategy shift. A couple of examples of that, I would say, we had a brand come to us, an emerging snack company. And the founders working with us, they had a pretty sizable team, and they were making a snack bag that they wanted to sell in like gas stations, 7-Elevens, and they loved it. Their family loved it. All of the employees loved it. And when we did testing, it turned out through general population testing that people in their natural environment, this is why in-home is so helpful in context research, they put it on their salads. So that's one example of what they were shocked. It's a total category shift. And they were able to pivot quickly, and they were successful. So it took a lot of grit to do that. But that's actually not that uncommon to actually have to pivot. The most common I would say that is a aha moment is people don't know who their consumers are. And this is all the way up to the big brand. So it's not surprising, and it happens often, where an example just recently, Sydney at Once Upon a Farm. I'm a mom of 3, love their products. They are all about building that healthy lifestyle from very, very young all the way through in snacking products. And Sydney and the team at Once Upon a Farm is convinced that their profile of consumer is very, very high-end, wealthy people. Because if you go to Instacart right now, you'll see Once Upon a Farm next to Happy Baby, and it's a very different price point. But through research, they actually have recognized that their consumer base is all across the board from a socioeconomic and income status. And that means that their consumers are willing to give a lot more to ensure that healthy lifestyle for their children. So think about the impact of that from their strategy, who they're targeting, how they're advertising, just to have that aha moment through research. And again, bringing that consumer general population voice forward, they really need to rethink. And that just happened. So
And
lots of examples.
these are literally business changing
Oh,
insights, right?
huge,
That you're
huge.
providing. Can you tell us at what point are they doing this level of product testing so that you don't
No.
get too far down a road before, or
You
spend
know
too
what?
much money before?
You are like,
find
here I
the
am,
job?
I'm ready to sell now. No, I'm kidding. This is why it has to be iterative. It has to really be an always on research strategy. You can't just pick a time and place and say, okay, now is the right time to listen to the consumer voice. Perceptions, needs of all of us are changing all the time. And so you might have your upfront strategy perfect. Your consumers locked in the segment. You've got everything buttoned up to their needs and desires. The sensory elements of that product are perfect, score high. You get that on shelf. And then another product comes in and it hits the product next to yours. Protein becomes a thing. Everybody's talking about protein. So I would say there's not one point in time. It's critically important to listen to customer voice all the time.
And if they were to hire Highlight, for example,
Yeah.
how do you engage with them?
So we have a platform similar to you, which is So Fun Tech Week here. We work with most of our customers in an annual subscription basis because they are working with us again from the entire product life cycle. So that is, let's do some concept testing before we actually build a prototype. Let's test again. Let's validate that prototype is actually meeting consumer preference. Then they launch it. Let's do some claims testing. Let's get on Target shelves. So we are working with them consistently to ensure whether it's innovating on new products or renovating on hero products, that they have product success in every product they launch. So we are an annual subscription platform, but we also do work flexibly with customers who are like, I just want to run one test with you and check it out. So, but typically it's an always on partnership.
Got it. Super helpful.
Yeah.
And Kristen, I want to go to you because I want to talk about how your technology helps brands where Statosphere sits specifically at the intersection of community and conversion. And your technology actually matches products with the right voices. Why does that matter to you more than ever? Or why should that matter to companies more than ever?
Yeah, I mean, I think both of them give great examples of, first of all, some brands not even realizing who their audience is to begin with.
Right.
So our platform, we have a network of over 60,000 creators that have profiles on our platform. They fill out a profile about themselves. It's funny because Highlight is very similar, but for product testing, like we have so many similarities. But we're on the creator side. So all these creators connect their Instagram account, their TikTok account. We verify that they have a good engagement level, all those different pieces. And then we match them with the right brands, and the brands can put in their targeting so that they can match with the right creators. And what we found, what I found with most of the brands that are very successful is they will actually keep their targeting pretty wide to see which creators resonate and claim it more. So we can actually show the claim rate within demographics and how it's performing within different demographics as well. And there's been some surprises that brands are not expecting. Now, like you said, even the big brands that you think have it all figured out, like if you're a small brand, don't think the big brands, they're the same boat where they're constantly shocked at like, oh, we thought that the older demographic was who we were going after versus the younger one, or people who are Costco shoppers versus Target shoppers, all of those different pieces as well. So we're on the other side is after the product has really been honed in, getting that customer feedback. Now you're putting it out there and starting to get almost like market research on the other end. And then ultimately getting the word out so you can get sales and conversions as well. So that's really where our technology sits. And we have a lot of data points on the food side, beauty side. So we know who's vegan, who, has different dietary restrictions, all of those different pieces. So we can match the right creators to the right brands so that authenticity, like Vivica was talking about, is there, right? Because you don't want somebody who's like eating, a bunch of bacon and all their stuff promoting your vegan maybe products next to it, right? You want to find the right creator that makes sense for you.
Super helpful. I'm going to go back to you, Vivica, and I want to talk about how you really promote loyalty through your technology. So Beam turns everyday purchases into moments of impact, right? And in the world of food, where obviously repeat behavior is integral, how does this actually reshape loyalty?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'd say a few things. So it comes back to, it is now consumers today, they have more options than ever, and it's harder to win share of wallet. The average Gen Z consumer buys using beauty as an example, it's the same dynamics apply in food. The average Gen X consumer bought from about 2 beauty brands, millennials are 3, Gen Z is 4. So even if you're loyal to 4 beauty products, there's less wallet to win and it's harder to succeed on the shelf as consumers have so many options. So one of the things that we do, again, you got to have the right product, you have to position it well, you have to find the right audience. And then one of the things that we help people understand is what they're a part of and why that ongoing commitment matters in a bigger way. And then starting a conversation with the consumer on why they are part of a community that actually matters in a big way. So one example is we see a lot of success with SMS and email triggers. In our product, of course, I can see how I personally am funding 30 pounds of produce, to use that example, or 5 hours of free therapy when I'm shopping with a specific brand. And what we've seen is that when brands can automatically text me when I saying, hey, we're 90% of the way to a goal that you're a part of now. Invite a friend to help us get there faster. Or here's a code to make twice as much impact with your next order. And then by the time a goal is reached with us, they can say, hey, we did it. You helped us fund another 100 hours of free therapy. And this is how you're part of our mission to make the world happier and make joy accessible every day. So really helping people continuously finding non-transactional ways to continue the conversation with consumers and add value for consumers is really, really critical to differentiate today and continue to build loyalty.
Yeah, it's a lot more impactful, I feel like, to be brought back to a brand's page by, hey, you are about to reach this goal of the film, the philanthropy that you chose, than to be asked to purchase the product that you maybe left in your cart. Kristen, I'm going to go back to you. And I wanted to ask you about trust and long-term differentiation. And that's that, how are consumer purchase decisions evolving in a world where the path to purchase starts with creators and not retailers? So
Yeah.
we're all noticing and feeling.
Yeah, great question. And I think we all know that like old stat that was like how many touches to convert someone. It used to be like 7. The latest stats I'm seeing are like 20. So when you're thinking about like how many of us would just see an ad and on TV and you buy it immediately if you've never heard of a brand, like it takes trust. And I think what's interesting with brands learning about a new product through a creator, I almost say it like counts as multiple touches because it's like this higher trust factor, especially if it's a creator they followed and that they know, or a creator that looks like them, right? You know, and I think the bigger concept that we're seeing a lot of CMOs talk about a lot is this concept of social SEO and the fact that the buyer's journey is starting on TikTok and starting on Instagram. So it's 73% of Gen Z actually search on TikTok instead of Google. So that's where they start their purchasing decisions. So they'll go there and be like, I want to search for vegan snacks, and they'll see what comes up. And what's so crazy is that it's not the big influencers that are coming up. It's actually everyday people, the way the algorithm works. And each one of us will see a different response based on your TikTok, search history. But at the end of the day, this is where I think, that brands are really rethinking how the customer journey works. And people are even inside of Target pulling out their phones and looking up reviews on social media and trying to see that social proof. So also taking that social proof, putting it on your website, putting it different places can also help. But I think that brands that are getting out of the mindset of just realizing that it's not a linear journey anymore. A lot of these buyers' journeys are happening on social media. If you take a step back and think of it that way, you will change your whole marketing strategy and you can shift it to really maximize that as well.
It's so true. Now, before I purchase anything, I feel like I'm on Instagram, and I'm not Gen Z, but
well, once you try TikTok, it's hard to go back. Like I use a search everything and they get me every time. Like my path to conversion personally is so much quicker when I go through TikTok, because where else can you go and see like 6 people review a product, 6 different people authentically review a product? It's amazing. Yeah,
it really is. Callista, I want to go back to you and sort of talk a little bit further about what we've started to discuss, which is sort of that balance between intuition and data. And I think founders are so obviously intuition based when making decisions, especially when you're starting out and you don't have a lot of data to go off of. But how do you balance between that? Like, what is your recommendation for founders as they think about that when they're testing out a bold concept?
I will answer that question, but I just bought the viral Instagram face masks and my kids and I just wore them together the other night. So anyway, it works. I get this question a lot, actually. I have lots of conversations with founders who are, some of them feeling pushed into data because they're like, I've gotten us this far. I know my consumers. I know them better than anybody. And so why do I need to invest in data? So I talk a lot about this, and I think it's a balance. It's absolutely a balance. I think the key is founder's gut is real. I call it clock speed. It's super impressive. And they have this really great, many of you out there, I don't have it that well, but you all do. You just have this great gut of what is right and what your audience wants. And I would say, don't ever get rid of that or discount that. That's real. And that's actually what got you where you are. The beauty of the data is that's complementary and you actually drive that data. So the data is consumers telling you what they think, but you know what questions to ask. And I think that's the link that a lot of founders don't really understand, that they need to use their intuition and their gut to drive what questions should I be asking? What should I be exploring with this audience to get data to then use that data and orient my company and team as to what our strategy is? So I would say it's very complementary. And for founders who think you have to dive fully into data and ignore your gut, I would say don't do that, but definitely don't leave the consumer voice and data behind.
Couldn't agree with that more, just in terms of trusting in the intuition. But yeah, asking the right questions, I think, is something that we often forget to do in order to figure out the direction for our business. Viveka, I want to ask you about long-term stickiness as well and product differentiation. And what's one tactic you've seen work especially well for a food or beverage brand trying to stand out in a saturated market to drive long-term retention?
Great question. I think that there are a couple things that are really impactful today. It honestly starts with acquiring a high LTV customer, or customers who are more likely to be high LTV. And ways that you can do that are, you got to be part of the cultural zeitgeist. You have to be where the creators are and where the consumer is in order to connect with people who are going to connect with your brand long term. Then I think it's about making sure that you're showing up with that very strategically and intentionally at every single touch point in the journey. You haven't done your work as a brand. If you have an amazing homepage, it has to show up at every single point in the journey as well. And then one of the examples we just talked about was ongoing conversation with consumers via text and email in ways that are compelling and timely and relevant. Other things that we've seen as well are just opportunities to reward consumers in unique ways and build community as well. So saying, here's what we have all done together, giving consumers data as well and transparency into, by choosing this brand, we use upcycled or we're using imperfect produce, for instance. You've prevented this much food waste. Reminding people that they are part of something that matters, like I think is the big theme that we're talking about here, really drives long-term loyalty as well.
Do you think that thing of impact should tie into the way that their business operates? Like you just used the example of the imperfect food in order to eliminate waste. Like, do you have brands that actually choose, here are the nonprofits I want to support and I want people to pick from those? Or what do you suggest?
Yeah, it definitely shouldn't be distinct, or definitely not at all opposed to how a brand operates overall. There has to be consistency. But that said, there's a lot of legacy brands out there who haven't necessarily had the ability to be founded on supply chain principles that have prioritized things that new incumbent and emerging brands are prioritizing. So there are ways for every brand to enter this conversation. I think that's something that people have a lot of challenges with. And it's important for brands, again, to look inward and think about, what is the unique value of my product? Am I helping people sleep better at night? Am I helping people live healthier lives? Well, how does this tie to a bigger mission? And that becomes the foundation for really authentic emotional storytelling, is what's the value of the product overall? So it is great and it's better. And in many cases, we've seen that we're actually creating a really justifiable return on investment in supply chain practices like that leads brands to go back and look at their supply chain in different ways so that they can continue this conversation with consumers. But I wouldn't say that is the only qualifying criteria for brands to have a voice on issues that are on the minds of their consumers and keeping them up at night.
And it seems like what you've just discussed kind of goes back to those founder principles too, of authenticity, really knowing yourself, having a broader mission and vision as a company that's bigger than just the transactional business that you're putting out there into the world. Do we have time for one question? So we have time for one question if anybody from the audience has any questions. Yeah. Who wants to take that?
Do you mean like generative, like of creating marketing materials with Gen AI? Oh, like AI search and yeah, there's so many strategies around how to show up on ChatGPT, but they change every single day. It's crazy. I just met with my marketing team like today about this. And I feel like this is the job to get into right now is like staying on the cutting edge because there's so few people that are. My personal like view of it is finding the person who like lives and breathes this and getting them on the team and like having them dig in because it's a full-time job seeing how quickly it's changing with showing up like there's a bunch of tactics and I'm sure the tactics I know from a week ago are already like obsolete this week. But it is shifting a ton of like people aren't going to Google to your point. So, I mean, with our platform, we focus on social SEO and helping people rank there, which I do think is an untapped market. And I don't know when it's going to get too competitive, but right now, if you get enough people posting with certain keywords, you can get ranking. Even little brands can get ranking, which I think is really a great kind of like growth hack at this time, but it's kind of like the early days of Google. Small brands could do that. At some point, I think other brands will catch up. But yeah, I'm curious too if you guys have seen anything else, like in terms of keeping up with all the AI search engine optimization.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of classic playbooks that work really well for SEO as well, like content creation. And part of where your question started is competition and how I think GEO is great as it relates to surviving and thriving in a hyper competitive marketplace because it's going to bring down the cost of keywords on other search platforms. It's unbundling search in a lot of ways as there are more places that consumers are going than just Google. So I think while brands are leaning into GEO and being on the cutting edge of the new tactics there, it's also a great opportunity to capture cost efficiencies in other search engines as well.
Yeah. And the one other thing you said earlier, like the LTV, like too many customers focus on like grabbing a new customer instead of retaining an old. And it's so much cheaper to retain an old customer than bring a new customer in. And I think that that's also something like really zooming in on like, once you get those core customers, how can you expand them as well to help you grow just in terms of helping you keep up with this age of crazy competition? Because it really is competitive market.
But just circling back to what all of you guys do though, and really Kristen, talking about you and the importance of having that authentic content in the community activated out there. I think that's going to help with GEO as well, because if you're being talked about a lot and you're high in search rankings, then inherently AI is going to be picking up on that as well. So.
All my children. I wanted to just say two things. All three of these companies are using generative AI in some aspect of the businesses they're running and is keeping them on the cutting edge. Every single one of them is making millions of dollars and they're all rolling toward profitability at a really speedy rate. And I just want everyone in this room to know how remarkable these three women and all their teams are and what they're doing for impact in the world today, as well as getting rich. So thank you.
You should wrap up on that note. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, everyone, don't get too excited. We're gonna transition now to our fireside chat. I'm thrilled to introduce Joe Saltz, editor of Delish, and Vanessa Pham from OMSUM. People will quiet down, I think.
Hi. Hi there. Okay, so you just heard from some incredible founders and experts about, I'm just going to make sure I say it all right, technology, community, and consumer values and how important they are. But now we're going to learn firsthand from a founder what it takes to build an authentic food brand and make it super successful. I also liked ending on the millions note, so I feel like we need to keep that rolling. I'm Jo Saltz. I run Delish here at Hearst and also House Beautiful, though that's not up there. And I will say that I've been at Hearst I'm about to hit my 21st year here at Hearst. Oh, no, thank you. 21 years. I started here as a deputy editor at 17, where I oversaw lifestyle, fashion, and beauty. I moved on to Food Network, where I was the executive editor. And then 10 years ago, me and 4 editors launched Delish here at Hearst. It has become a really major force in the food media landscape. In our highs, we hit 60 million users a month. We have over 30 million followers on various social platforms, and we've hit over 2 billion video views. So Delish is, in a lot of ways, sort of following a similar trajectory as a lot of the stories we heard. But Vanessa, tell everybody a little bit about you and your incredible journey, because we are in for a real treat today to hear about your story and how you made your incredible brand successful.
Absolutely. Hello, I'm Vanessa. I am a founder coach, but in a past life, I was the CEO of OMSOM and co-founder as well, with my sister, Kim, who is traveling the world as an exited founder does. A little bit about me. I'm the daughter of Vietnamese refugees. I grew up in a suburb of Boston. I was a good little daughter of refugees and worked really hard and went to Harvard and worked at Bain. And then at 24 was like, you know what, never mind. I'll take a leap and start a company. And so as you might imagine, along the way of that journey, you kind of have to confront a lot of stuff within yourself while you're building something, beautiful out in the world. And so the journey of OMSOM was as much of an kind of introspective awakening, if you will, as it was kind of like pouring our heart and soul into the Proud and Loud business that we built.
Start from the beginning. Tell us why food and what drew you there in the first place.
Yeah. So I distinctly remember when we started working nights and weekends on OMSOM while we still had our jobs, we sat down and we asked ourselves 2 questions. One was, what is a mission that we feel we have to impact with our time? Like, this is what we feel called to do. And then the second question is, well, what industry could we do that in and hopefully like build a real business in? And so we went and wrote each of our answers, and then we compared, and they were like the same.
So tell me the answer.
So
you come
the
back
first
together.
one, what is a mission we would love to impact, was we both felt called to educate on the multitudes within Asian America, which historically we felt like had been flattened and oftentimes like erased. And so we knew that, well, let's be real, a lot of the entry point for those conversations are actually in food. And so we were like, well, let's start there. And so OMSOM was born.
So you come back together and you're like, let's start a food company. I'm sorry, I need more granular.
Sure.
I'm going to really grill her on this because I feel like there's a lot
it's
for us
crazy to
learn.
start a food business.
Yes, but I mean, clearly you had the smarts and clearly you had the passion and the know-how, but just like, how does this begin from a seed of an idea to actually become a living, breathing thing in the business world?
Well, Joy and I first have to say I didn't have the know-how. I definitely didn't have the know-how at 24. I had some great, experience at Bain, but starting a food business really was a black box. And so it became this just path of learning and curiosity and making many mistakes and finding people that were willing to spend time with us. And eventually,
you cooking in the kitchen?
Yeah. So the very first step was actually knocking on doors of chefs to see if they would partner with us and create a line of products, because our mission is to educate on the multitudes. As a Vietnamese American, how could I ever purport to be the expert on Japanese food and Korean food and Filipino food? And so for that reason, that was our first step. Let's get some chefs on board. And I will have to say, most chefs would not give us the time of day, and I get it. Like, we had nothing to show them at that point. But one did. Chef Jimmy Lee of Madame Vo, go get pho there ASAP. And after we got him, we relentlessly name dropped him, and then the other chefs gave us their time.
That's a media secret
You
too,
got
by
it.
the
You
way.
have
You get
to.
Rihanna to sign on and then everybody falls into place. But so I want to ask you though, so do you think there were decisions you made in those early days that set you up for long-term success? I mean, I think partnering with chefs clearly was a great one, but were there other things that you guys were doing back in the day that you could see now looking back were really put you on the right path?
Yeah, I mean, one of the hardest decisions that we made early on was to actually do a full rebrand before we even launched. So imagine spending months building out a visual identity, like tens of thousands of dollars on great designers. And as we got closer to launch, we took a look at the branding and the name, which at the time was Oxtail. And we had to confront that, you know what, we want to scrap this whole thing, delay our launch at least 4 months, and actually put forth a brand and a visual identity that lived out the ethos of the brand in a very real way. And so Oxtail went out the door, and it came
What made you question it?
As we were getting closer to launch, we got very clear on our ethos. And our ethos as a brand is about being proud and loud. It's our middle finger to the model minority myth of Asians being docile and submissive. And we were like, oh, our branding doesn't, at the time it was like cute shapes and like no shade to that aesthetic, but it just didn't reflect this energy of like, we're here to stir the pot. And so we threw everything out, and Om Som in Vietnamese means rowdy, rambunctious, or, noisy. It's a negative term. It's what parents say when they're scolding you. And so we were like, yeah, that's the energy. And then the next piece was the visual identity, which has elements of heat distortion, flames, sound distortion, like bubbles. And that was the noisy, the fiery energy. So, it was all about like, okay, if we're going to build a brand that's going to start some kind of movement, like we better have it resonate on a visceral, emotional level. And it's not going to be a transactional food brand. It's going to be one of heart.
It's interesting because I would say certainly in digital media, there is a lean towards get it out there and get a response, right? So that you can start getting data, you can start getting people to react, and you can start learning from that. But there's something to be said for getting it right before you put it out there, which is, I would say, almost more a magazine media sort of thought process, right? You want to perfect it before you print it. But I would say that like, it's fascinating to me that you delayed the launch to make sure that you guys nailed it in order to get it onto the right path. And you think that was a meaningful moment?
Absolutely. I feel like on the product side, like get the product out there, start getting feedback, like start testing. But when you're having a launch moment where you're really telling your story for the first time, for us, we had a very ambitious vision of like, when we launch this brand, we want to start a movement. Like, I think that was, I look back and I'm like, wow, we were pretty ballsy, but like we wanted that. And so, I think nailing the launch for us was a part of that, but I don't think that's every brand's path. And I say that all the time.
No, but there's something to learn from it for sure. Let's talk about building demand and getting it out there. So talk about those first initial steps and sort of what was your growth path, would you say? Was it digital first? Was it in-store? Was it a little mix of both? What was your strategy and thought process there?
Yeah. So the reason we talked about starting a movement was because at the time when we were launching Omsom, we launched in May of 2020. Most of the Asian brands.
We have to pause on that for 1 second. May of 2020.
Wild time.
That's wild.
It really tested me to be like, nimble and agile. But during this time, there were not many, there were very few like kind of like next gen, more modern Asian food brands. What existed on the shelf at the time were, Asian brands that were owned by conglomerates that, let's be honest, had dragons and pandas and bamboo fawns. Like that was the energy. And so, again, like, Asian culture kind of being flattened, and we were wanting to build something with real texture, but we knew it would be challenging. to many Americans, just as far as like representing the flavors and the cuisines with cultural integrity. So we were like, if we're going to compel them to like go out of their comfort zone and challenge them to meet us where we're at, we better make it very enticing. And so we had a very clear strategy around how to cut through the noise as a brand.
Spill it.
Yes. Okay. So there's a couple components to it. I would say one piece was around building community ahead of time, but with a lot of precision around this. So a lot of brands, when they launch, they know they want to scale. And so they're trying to speak to a massive audience right out of the gate. They're like, okay, we got to be accessible to these people. We need to speak to, this broad range. And we really turned that on its head. And we said, actually, as a small brand with fewer resources, we should actually dial in on a niche and create an echo chamber in that niche. And that's how you cut through the noise. You narrow in your scope and you like try to get lights flashing all over in this niche. That's the key to then unlocking the audience around them and then around them and eventually. But if you try to boil the ocean, you never will cut through the noise.
So it's the connectivity. It's a super close connectivity.
Yeah, it's focusing on a community
Yep.
that has cohesion and where you can actually build credibility and create that echo
So
chamber.
how are you doing that? What were you doing to really build that very tight-knit community?
So many different things. Part of it was like actually as founders being a part of it ourselves. Like it wasn't impersonal. It was extremely personal. And I think at the beginning, you have to do stuff that doesn't scale. Like as much as we'd love to just like day one push buttons and like, see big numbers, it doesn't quite work like that. And so we were hosting events. We were showing up and tabling at Asian American community events. We were throwing parties with like the Asian American culture makers, like not just food influencers, but the DJs, the chefs, the cookbook writers, like whoever would spend time with us. And it was much more kind of like boots on the ground, grassroots to start.
I'm sure it was also like making sure you're answering comments or responding to people on social media, all of those things that we talk about, the stuff too that does not scale, but makes such a huge difference when you're trying to create a human to human connection with the brand, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, on the content creation front and like social media front, we had a strategy that was very clear on when we were trying to drive conversion and when we were trying to build brand awareness and equity and depth of connection. And the mix was not 50-50. The mix was 75-25, 75 in the brand. And that's especially at the early days. I think that's very important. As you scale, that mix can shift. But I think when you muddy the two, it can feel transactional to consumers. And so, yeah, if you're trying to cut through the noise, I think you got to play the long game a little bit.
I think it's a great point. I also think just from a cutting through the noise perspective, it's a very male dominated supply chain. Is that correct? And so were you dealing with those kinds of issues as well as a woman? And how were you cutting through that noise and getting things done?
You mean like on the manufacturing
Yes,
side?
getting the products made.
Oh my
and doing
gosh.
all that. How was that? What was that like?
Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh, that's the answer.
Yeah. Oh, well, our first manufacturer was a smaller scale manufacturer. And I mean, frankly, I was out there often on the floor, like helping. It was very much like kind of mom and pop scale. And then by the time we got kind of the national green light from Whole Foods, we were like, oh, we gotta get to the next manufacturer. And so there was a big transition there. The minimum order quantities like 15x going from that manufacturer to the next, but we got it done. There were some major hiccups, but we got it done.
Hiccups, give us some.
Oh gosh. We had, I mean,
Because that's the
leaking.
dream. I feel like the Whole Foods is the dream, right?
Yes.
Everybody
Well,
wants to get
there's lots of dreams along the way. And that's one really
one of
great
them.
milestone. And we love the partnership we've had with them. But let's see, I mean, we were going as fast as possible to launching in Whole Foods because basically they have like their timelines. And so when they gave us the green light, they were like, okay, maybe it was 7 months ahead. And so we rushed and one of our SKUs was leaking like tons of packets. This happened multiple times though, such that my dad at one point actually texted me and was like, hey, how many packets are leaking? Can you mail them to mom and me and we'll like wipe them down? He was like, a penny saved is a penny earned. And I was so touching, but also I was like, Dad, do you know what scale this business is at?
Oh my gosh. That is hilariously funny though.
I
Could you
know.
imagine? You'll be
It was
like,
real. It was very sweet. It was also such like an immigrant dad text of just like, I want to save every penny, even if it's like your company's money.
that is unbelievable. So how you figured it out.
We did. We had to take a lot of it back from the distribution centers. There were losses involved, but like it was the manufacturer's fault. So, we had to negotiate that. Those are always hard conversations, but they're very much a part of the journey.
Unbelievable. So looking back, do you wish that there were things that people had told you? And is there advice that you have at this point, as you developed, launched, scaled, and then ultimately exited? I mean, are there things that you wish someone had explained a little bit clearer to you at this point?
Oh my gosh.
By the way, I just also need to say that Vanessa is so sweet because she got a list of pretty much like good questions right before. And I, in my Joe Salt's way, changed every single one of them literally before I walked up on stage. So she's just staring at me like, okay, that wasn't on the list. So you're going to have to forgive her if I'm throwing her some curveballs. You're doing great.
Oh,
We're doing
great. I'm so glad.
you're
I
doing great.
mean, that's how you know you're getting the real answers.
Well, I appreciate because we also said before we headed up here that we were just going to have a nice conversation because I was honestly actively interested in hearing this story firsthand, and so I was going to like pay attention to the questions, but I also wasn't really going to. But I do want to know, do you wish that someone had just, even if there's just one thing, you're like, nobody told me this one thing,
Yeah, there's so many things.
or 10 things?
Yeah, there's
I'll
so
hear
many.
all of them.
Where to begin? Or what is most important? Let's see. I would say, I was talking about this earlier with you. And I think one of the most important and overlooked conversations is around not just cash runway. Like we know, everybody's losing sleep over that all the time. But I think a really important conversation to center early on before you need to is founder runway. Like how much gas you have left in the tank, what depletes you so hard and what actually refuels you, and what can you be doing now to take care of yourself, take care of your relationships in the business, outside of the business, and how can you show up for your team, not from a place of fear, but from a place of clarity and trust in self and others. Because like you hear all the stories of founders that get toxic, and like it comes from that. It comes from people being fearful, people not taking care of themselves, and not looking out for others. So yeah, that would be my biggest message. I was 24 when I started OMSOM, and it was just this vertical learning curve for the next 6 years. And I was trying my damn hardest to take care of myself. But I just wish more people would like kind of normalize and center that conversation. I feel it's often kind of like, and after like only when it becomes a problem are then, people making space for it.
It does not feel as a leader, it doesn't feel like a priority. You sort of feel like you are the sacrificial lamb, you have to put
Right.
yourself aside. And that just cut me deep. That was pretty intense. It's a very true statement. And it must have been a really difficult learning curve for you being at 24 to go through all of that. I'm sure at least you had your family with you, right? Like along for the
Yes.
ride. So what's next? What's the next big thing for you?
Yes. So I stayed on for 6 months with OMSOM and then eventually left. So I've been kind of on the other side for 6 months. It's been a whole new chapter. And today I am coaching founders. And I specialize in specifically working with founders and businesses that are shaping culture at a national level. True to the whole dialogue that we've just had, it's where I'm passionate. It's those founders that I feel like are so purpose driven, and want to shape the future and are kind of crazy enough to think they can, that I love working with. And, along the journey, I'm learning from them, just as much as they're learning from me. And some of y'all are in the audience today. But that's what I've really been focused on.
Well, you are deeply inspirational, and we have a few minutes left and we can take some questions. Please, if you have, Vanessa has been through it and has some incredible learnings to teach. Does anyone have any questions out there?
Yes.
I mean, I'm pointing just into the dark. I don't know. Please, whoever wants to show one out. Oh. Yeah, let's clap that. It's a great question.
Great question. That was on the list.
That's on the
actually.
list.
That's on the
To
list.
be fair, I didn't get there. We only had 2 minutes left, but that is here. Yeah. She's like, yes, thank you for asking the approved question.
Did someone feed that to you? No, okay. So, it's such a complex question because it has everything to do with the founders, it has everything to do with the business, has everything to do with the funding environment and where strategics heads are at, like what they're trying to do next. But to boil it down, I would kind of look at two different things. On one hand, it's what's best for the business. So looking really honestly at what's going to propel the business forward and what the business needs at this stage. So could it be funding? In our case, it was, we want to innovate more in Asia and we want funding to grow into our retail presence. And so that's when I started to look around and say, okay, should I consider an exit? And then the second piece is the personal piece, kind of, some of what I mentioned around founder runway. At what point are you the best person to be running the business, or is somebody else or another organization? For me and my sister, Kim, we're co-founders. A lot of it was like, we just really wanted to be sisters again. The co-founder relationship was like really crowding it out. And, that's still a journey of just like, whoa, now we're just sisters. Like, what does that feel like? So we're just feeling that out and getting into that kind of like next part of our sisterhood. But I think for us, that was a really big motivator.
I'll say that, I know you're not asking me and I haven't exited, but I will say that, and I'll never let Delish go. No, I'm just kidding. No, but the other brand I run, House Beautiful, it's going to be 130 years old next year. And we always talk about how the best thing we can do is pass this brand off to the next people who will run it, who can continue this legacy. And I do feel like it can be looked at as exiting. It could be looked at this, letting it grow and fly, right? And do the next amazing thing with the next people who can champion it forward. Does anyone else have any questions up there? There were definitely some questions. Yes, in white shirt, white sweater.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I really admire your whole trajectory, Vanessa. I work at a creative agency called High Tide. We work with a lot of early stage brands and help bring their brand to life through visual identity and messaging. It was so refreshing to hear you talk about how important that was at such an early stage. I find that a lot of the times it's quite often neglected or left for last. So I guess as a founder yourself, how did you have that intuition to really focus on launching and not just raising money or reaching out to people that wanted to collaborate with you when it comes to visual identity?
Because yours has such a distinct visual
It
identity.
really does.
It's really important.
Thank you.
Thank you. So at the end of the day with CPG, like as much as obviously we centered the visual identity, like the product just has to perform. So that is like a huge part of it. And I never want to like kind of overlook it because I think a lot of people love to talk about the Omsum brand. And so I'm always like, I want to balance that with the reality of CPG, right? And if you want to cut through the noise in a very noisy space with a lot of other emerging brands that are competing for your customers, I do think packaging and visual identity is like one of the greatest things that you can kind of invest in. And so for us, I think it came down to like, if we're going to start this movement to cut through the noise, what levers do we have to nail? And every opportunity we could tell our story, we wanted to, and we saw visual identity as just another medium to tell that story. And so we knew we're like, this is something we really want to get right. And we're both creative founders, as My sister Kim is deeply, deeply creative. She calls herself an internet weirdo, which she is. And I am on the less internet weirdo, but I am still creative. And I think for both of us, it just resonated like very deeply for us that this was going to be a place to tell our story and to live out the energy and kind of land emotionally and be culturally resonant beyond a transactional food product.
In food, I feel like visual matters, maybe more so than any other, maybe
Yeah.
fashion, but
Yeah.
food in particular really defines. We are at time, but your infectious spirit and enthusiasm truly is very inspirational. And thank you so much for being up here. Please, everybody, give Vanessa a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. That wraps up our formal programming for tonight. We'll be sticking around for some networking in the lobby. Make sure to grab your rule breaker snacks. And thank you all again.